one of the ways that they keep people on the platform is enraging them, because if you're mad, you're going to comment and engage with these things. So when this thing started to pick up shares, it exploded. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. And again, the practice was kind of a innocent bystander almost in this entire thing. But that didn't make a difference because it was exploding.
Hey there, welcome to the Dr. Marketing Tips Show. I am Jennifer.
And I'm Corey.
And today we're going to talk about something that nobody ever wants to have to deal with, and that is an actual dumpster fire that happened with one of our clients and the response that we had to this dumpster fire.
Yeah, so unfortunate incident, but it is a lesson in crisis communication where something went viral and we had to respond to that. So we'll kind of go through exactly what happened, how we contained it, what we did in terms of recovery, and have a little bit of discussion on kind of what we learned through that I think makes sense for everyone that's listening or watching this. But yeah, so it started with a TikTok video, and in this video, there was someone who was making some pretty racially insensitive comments that was then linked incorrectly, by the way, to this practice. And so essentially what happened was the practice was brought into this and was completely innocent, blindsided by this.
Yeah. And so what happened is it was like it came in overnight, like at 2 a.m. And it was a TikTok video, like Corey just said, and it was a TikTok video, and somehow the video, somebody mentioned on one of these threads that it was tied to the practice because of it. It was a family member, an employee or something.
Work there, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the fact is like, this is the kind of stuff that happens on a regular basis, and you got to have a game plan for it, because it happened at like 2 a.m. and by the time we woke up, the video it wasn't just on TikTok anymore. It was on Instagram, it was on Facebook, it was being shared across platforms, it was on YouTube. And basically what happened is, it started taking on a life of its own, and all of a sudden we had all these affiliations, and we were being the practice was being tagged on everything on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, Threads. And then they started attacking the Google reviews and leaving 1-star reviews and the Yelp reviews. Then the guy started a GoFundMe page. And then literally within 24 hours, the original video had 1 million likes and 100,000 shares. And the comments were mentioning the practice, and it was just gaining traction. And then, the worst piece is not the worst. And one of the tough pieces was the phone numbers of key personnel got included in the post. And one of the poor guys came in and had 300 nasty voicemails, and his phone rang off the chain all day long for weeks of people calling it with like hatred and whatnot. And it disrupted operations. It became a viral nightmare, and it involved like us really getting in there. And so there were some key areas that were impacted. Corey, I don't know if you want to talk about them, but like, it was just immediate. Like, we just had this situation happening, and it was unfolding in real time. And it was one of those things where everybody had to stop what they were doing to get this thing contained.
Yeah, I mean, the worst part about that, though, is there was also people immediately jumped on the bandwagon here. And there was people in the comments that were falsely claiming that, oh, yeah, that like so-and-so does work there. And they were making these employment confirmations that were just not true. So it started from this, this little spark, and it spread into this wildfire. And then, like you said, there was inbound DMs. There was dozens and dozens and dozens of false Google reviews, tags in social media. People started to go through posts and then comment on all of the posts, and it got out of hand very quickly.
And it didn't stay local. It was one of those. No. Like, it had a million likes. Like, 100,000 people shared it. It was one of those things that was worldwide. And it reminded me of like way back in the day when I was in public office and something would happen like with animal services because people love animals.
Mhm.
And like I would come into 4,000 emails. It was like that kind of situation. I mean, it just was a lot. So we learned some very specific things related to just like the initial piece of this. One is that misinformation can gain traction even indirectly. It's not like misinformation comes from one person. It doesn't even matter if there's facts that go with it. It's just that a video that can happen in the middle of the night can gain so much traction and spread misinformation. And if you don't have a game plan for getting in front of it, like it's gonna take on a life of its own.
Yeah, it's unfortunate too because so many of these platforms, you know, their whole game, you know, their algorithm says, let's keep people on the platform. One of the ways that they keep people on the platform is enraging them because if you're mad, you're going to comment and engage with these things. So when this thing started to pick up shares, it exploded. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. And you know, again, the practice was kind of a innocent bystander almost in this entire thing. But that didn't make a difference because it was exploding. So I think, you know, one of the other things that we learned was that speed really matters because we had to very quickly come up with a plan, coordinate everyone so that we knew what was going on, both on our side from the, you know, the agency standpoint and on the practice side to specifically for admin and ops, because patients were going to start asking about this. And like you mentioned, it was just going to kind of disrupt the day-to-day flow. And we knew that the quicker that we could respond and kind of contain this, the least amount of potential reputational damage we were going to have.
Yeah, and another thing we learned immediately too was it wasn't just the original post that was the issue. It was the comment section. And a lot of times, if you're not tagged in the comments, you don't see them. And so thank goodness we had a monitoring system in place. And we already kind of had a plan. We just needed to mobilize in a very quick way. And so, you know, something that started at 2 a.m, by 9, 10 a.m., like we had everybody on point, making sure that we were working on it. And then we did like a daily situational analysis so that, you know, the CEO was kept informed. Here's what's going on right now. Here's where we are. And it just became like the main project of the week. But, you know, it was a major thing. So 1 million likes, 100,000 shares. You don't know what kind of dumpster fire you're going to wake up to, but that is like the situation itself. So let's talk about what we did to respond and to contain the situation when it happened, because again, it was a significant disruption to the practice and it wasn't anything that they had control over.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things that you can do. You know, if you ever unfortunately find yourself in this situation, one of the first things that we did was make sure that comments were disabled on all of the social media accounts, because like you said, that's a breeding ground here. So we kind of tried to choke that hose and then made sure that all the ads were paused. So we didn't want ads going out during this sensitive time period, because that was going to do nothing but just sort of fan the flames.
Well, and because people can leave comments on the ads.
Right.
So it becomes this whole other level of monitoring. So we just shut it down.
Yeah. And if they're already upset and then they keep seeing the brand, like it didn't make sense. So we turned that off.
And then we had those direct messages, the DMs. Like I think we assigned a dedicated person to deal with within the first couple hours. We had over 100 that had come in. They had to manually be approved and responded to. One thing that we did was we had to deal with the DMs. The DMs were a lot, and it required a dedicated person on team just to deal with those incoming messages that were coming in mainly through Facebook and Instagram.
Yeah, and so we had an official statement that were being responded to or being sent for those DMs, and then
I'll say this: the official statement, the original official statement was very bland, not taking ownership, like just, you know, like 101 in terms of official statements. The CEO made the executive call and he said, no, I'm going to tackle this head on. And he said, this person has never been, nor will be, or nor is employed at this practice, and any comments otherwise are wrong. Where typically a practice or company would put out a very generic statement, just not ownership. The CEO in this case said, no, I'm going to go directly on it. And I think it really did help.
Agreed. Yeah, because I think, and depending on the situation. So if you ever find yourself in one of these situations, obviously it's going to be unique, but so many times these statements are kind of like massaged, and then they go through 10 different people and approvals. And by the time you actually get the statement, it's this very generic kind of watered down thing. This one was very direct and to the point. And I think it did exactly what it was supposed to do. I think that was a good call.
Yeah. And then the other thing that we had to do immediately was we had someone monitoring all the DMs and just responding to them. But then we had to go in and we had to remove harmful comments that had been made. Because, once it happened, we turned everything off. But we still had to go in, and there were hundreds of comments that we had to remove. And then people who were because there were fake profiles or faceless profiles, we had to go in and block specific people because they were part of this group that was just attacking, it almost felt like a paid guns, that were coming after the practice. And we had to go in and just make sure we were protected. And so those were kind of some of the immediate things that came out of from day one, within hours. Another thing is we got through this whole first day, we had 39 false 1-star reviews, and every one of them gets published on Google. And we had to escalate the issue with Google and prove to them that we were under fire. And it took us a good week for Google to recognize them. And eventually they took them down, but we had to get in, we had to respond to things with our official statement in case other people were looking at it. We had to report things to Google. We had to provide documents. Yep. And yeah, we had to flag every one of them. It was a whole thing. And that was somebody's specific job that week.
Yeah. And in addition to that, for Google, we also posted a statement, also put it on the practice website, also put it and pinned it on social media too, because again, as this was continuing to draw attention, we wanted as many outlets as possible that, channels that we control to say, here's what's actually going on. And then we continue to listen and confirm these mentions and take action as necessary by that, including the DMs, reviews, whatever new content was kind of coming out.
Yeah. And something I want to mention too is make sure that whoever you work with or whoever's handling your social, that you have a listening tool turned on. It's one thing to kind of pay attention to things, but this thing had so the tentacles were so long, and it was going to places that even if you have someone in-house looking at it, they weren't going to be able to catch it all. It was one of those things we use a professional grade listening tool, but we literally had to turn it up and really go to the highest level version to make sure that we got this thing everywhere. So some key things we learned during this whole day one containment is you got to have some protocols in place. You got to have thought through this stuff. We had SOPs and we had an escalation matrix already kind of done because we've been through some BS before. So we basically were okay, here we go. And just got everyone together. It was stop everything you're doing. This is what we're going to do. I would say you need it was one of those things I had to take the reins because the CEO was not going to hear from anybody else on our team other than me. And it was a daily, sometimes twice a day, because his world was on fire. And so thank goodness we had a team in place that was ready to rock and roll. And we had a relationship with the client, and the client, we just worked together with ops to get this thing done. I think the next thing we learned is, one is you got to know who's in charge, but two is you got to have a unified response across the board. You got to say, this is the message. This is all you're getting across. Mm-hmm. No, do not go off message, because this isn't the kind of thing where one person can handle it. Everybody does. So immediately what we had to do was we got the official statement. We put the pieces in place. We got with the team, and then we escalated everything across the board. We were internally checking in on a regular basis, every couple hours. What's going on? What's happened? Who did what? Let's make sure we're moving this thing forward. But, being prepared and then having that unified message mattered immensely. And then finally, coordinating with the staff, not just us and our team, because we're the marketing agency for this practice, but our team really through me working with the CEO and the ops staff, like that was critical. You had to have somebody on both sides that were point of contact.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is kind of, PR crisis communication 101, right? It's have a plan in place in case you ever need it. Hopefully you never do, but like a Boy Scout, and always be prepared. And then stick to the message. You've got key talking points. Do not deviate from those. And then anyone that is going to do any sort of internal or external communication, doesn't matter. Make sure that they are in the loop. They have a script, or they have the same talking points. So that way, again, it's unified, because if it's not, then that's where you're going to discover a lot of leaks in your boat.
Yep. And I would say this too, like, interestingly, like, and I think this is a bigger point, the CEO and the doctors would say, like, well, has he gotten on the news yet? Well, who the hell cares if it's on the news? Because guess what? Like, it's had 1 million views on social, and it's been shared 100,000 times. That's like the world news. That's not even like your national news. Like, that's the world news here. Like, social is the news.
Yeah. A lot more people are going to see that than on local news broadcast.
Yeah, and they're not responding and talking about you on the news. They're responding and talking about you on social media. And I think, that's the world we live in, and we have to keep that in mind. And then finally we had like the recovery, like, like what was our plan? Like the stuff happened that, what hit the wall. We had to get in front of it. We had to contain it. Thank goodness we had a plan, and then a week later, within a week, all of the engagement had kind of subsided. Like, it had kind of died down. There were no new reviews. We got the stuff removed from Google. That was great. The media never picked it up, which was awesome. Because I think the media kind of has an ear for this stuff too. They know when stuff is like going crazy.
Well, yeah, and like you said too, I mean, they within a week they kind of took their pitchforks and were on to the next crisis, thankfully. So,
well, I will say this too. What made this a little worse for this particular practice is they were transitioning to a new EHR, and when they transitioned to a new EHR, we also transitioned the process for reputation management. So we weren't currently sending out review invites. Literally, we had like a 30-day downtime, and this happened during that. So not only did we have our reviews limited, like our new stuff being limited, we were being attacked by the others. And so like both of them, so we ended up having to internally launch some things related to the EHR before they were 100% ready, just to counter some of the negative commentary.
Yeah. And luckily, after just a little over a week, it seemed like, there was one or two comments that came in, one DM, and then those were handled, they were blocked. And he said the news didn't report on it. And then it was kind of over just as fast as it started almost.
Yeah, it did. And I think, some key points that we learned, from overall is that crisis requires being patient, but also being very precise in your like response to what's going on. You got to know what matters. You got to focus on what matters, like from an engagement or re-engagement standpoint. You got to act fast, and really, you can only act fast if you have a plan.
And also read the room, right? I mean, we knew that we had to act fast and do what we needed to do in terms of messaging, but also realize that it makes sense to stop advertising in this moment. Like this is an opportunity to press pause on a couple of things to not continue to exacerbate the problem.
Absolutely. And I think the final, like the biggest piece, I mean, outside of having a plan is those listening tools made all the difference to being able to contain this. We would not have been able to contain it had we already not had a listening tool in place, and had we not had the ability to increase the reach on the tool.
Yeah, for sure. Because without that tool, you would, you would know what people are saying maybe directly on your page. But that is, if you think of it as like a pie graph, that's like 20%.
Yeah.
And you'd be missing the rest. You might as well just put your head in the sand and hope that nobody asks you about it if you don't have that listening tool.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll end up kind of with this. So this was a video that was probably 45 seconds. It was on TikTok, and it was It was racially charged. Around the same time period, probably a couple weeks prior to this, we had a practice that also had a crisis. And their crisis was the doctor, one of the surgeons, woke up in the morning, had a confrontation with his ex-wife and shot and killed her. And that hit the news. And we thought that was a crisis. It got a tenth of the traction as the one that was the racially charged video on TikTok. The news took over the entire market because the doctor murdered his wife. But it didn't go crazy on social. This thing happened on social and it blew up compared to the murder. And, two different crises, two different lessons, but like the power of social media is real.
Yeah. And I think, even just zooming out from that, you never know which thing is going to stick. And so that's why, we say it all the time, but that's why you kind of need a plan, because, whether it's crisis communication or, just a marketing campaign too, you could put, hundreds of hours into a campaign and it just doesn't resonate. It doesn't take off. And you could do a couple of silly social media posts and you're going to see engagement like you've never seen before. So there's just no way to tell. And I think this is a good example of that, and just always, the need to be prepared, really.
That's right. So with that, I'm Jennifer.
I'm Corey.
Hope you don't have a crisis of your own, but if you do, refer to these steps. With that, we'll see you next time on the Dr. Marketing Tips Show.
If you want more like this, hit like and subscribe so you'll always be alerted to new episodes when they come out. And if you want information about us, visit us over at insightmg.com. That's insightmg.com. We'll see you on the next episode.